Hello everyone, I'm Anthony Gismondi and I'll be your moderator today. I want to welcome you to today's discussion on sustainability and our mini tasting that we will hold throughout this discussion. The plan is to pry some useful information out of our guests as we explore the notion of sustainability, ultimately asking the question, does it make better wine or different wine? If you're joining us during the Facebook Live event, I'll be answering questions in the chat feature. If you've just found us, visit the webpage listed here for more information about our topic and wines we'll be discussing throughout this session today. I want to introduce our guest to you very quickly before we get started. Justin Seidenfeld is the Director of Winemaking at Rodney Strong Vineyards in Healdsburg. Randy Ullom, well-known winemaster at Kendall-Jackson in Sonoma County. And Phil Wente, a fourth-generation wine grower and founder of Marietta's Well, joins us from a little further south in the Livermore Valley. Gentlemen, great to have you here today on what is more or less the 10th anniversary of sustainability, at least a framework of practices that have been employed by California wine growers, which I think a lot of us didn't think much about 10 years ago, but have been amazed at what has now happened in the last decade in California. In fact, it's gone so well that it looks like consumers are jumping on board faster than anybody could have imagined at this point to somehow get connected to the wine industry. But I don't know, I felt from the very beginning that the wine industry has always been a leader in this category, and I wondered why other businesses probably weren't as active as the wine business. But in the end, wine is about farming, and I think that's what's driven a lot of it. So today, we're going to start, we're going to begin talking about water a little bit with Randy. The idea was to talk about subjects that these three gentlemen are very closely associated with at the winery, and see how it affects what's going on actually at the winery, and perhaps affects the wine that we're going to taste today. Maybe not, but maybe it will. We'll get into that. Randy, welcome to the discussion. Great to see you.
Good to see you too, and thank you.
Let's talk about water. I know you have a lot of things you want to say about it. We didn't think much about it when you started making wine, I think 40 years ago. I think we thought we'd all have enough water forever. Things have changed.
Things have certainly changed. I mean, back in the day, 40, 45 years ago, it seemed like there was an unlimited amount of water, and it was used just like that. One of the interesting things that has happened over the years, and especially of late, is people, especially us, are realizing that water pretty soon is going to be worth more than gold at the end of the day. Because without water, we're going to be in big trouble, if not just out of business or dead, for that matter. Mm. So, from our perspective, we've been looking at it at a lot of different ways to conserve water and or use water over and over again, the same water. And on the winery side, some of the things that we've done to conserve waters, for our Chardonnay, we barrel fermented. So at some point you have to clean those barrels. And it used to be, we have three phases of the cleaning process: the first rinse, the second rinse, the third rinse, or third part is more cleaning than rinsing. And we would just use the fresh water for each one of those. Now we use the water there 3 times. So we're using our first initial rinse for the gross lees with the last water that we had used. So we're taking turns going down that boat. So that cuts that water use down to 1/3 of what it was. Additionally, in the cellar, for some tanks that aren't necessarily used for fermentations or cold stability, where they really need some serious cleaning, tanks for, say, bottling, where the wine that's going in is effectively clean already, as clean as it could be. And so after we empty those tanks and give it just a quick rinse, then we stick in a UV light that just, which is kind of crazy because the guys in the cellar can't hear anything because the light doesn't make any noise. But you just turn that on, and that sanitizes the tank and sterilizes it. And that saves a fair amount of water right there. So on the winery side, we've gone from, and this is, I think, a historic number for everyone, I'm presuming, but it used to take, about 9 gallons of water to make a gallon of wine. And now, for what we've been doing, we've cut that about in half to 4.5 gallons. And you probably are thinking, gosh, why does it take so much water to make wine? Well, cleanliness is next to godliness, actually, in the cellar. So you got to have everything cleaner than clean. And that's where all that water goes, basically right down the drain. So whatever you can save actually allows you to have more water left, in the earth, in the aquifer, for the community, for everyone out there, and the animals. And on the vineyard side, leading up to saving a little bit of water here and there, we have a lot of precision farming techniques and ways to measure the water need on a per day or per hour basis in the vineyards. And then that can be tied into your irrigation system. So you're only putting on exactly what the plant needs, or even maybe starving it just a little bit to enhance flavor sort of towards the end of the harvest, but you're not wasting water. The other interesting thing, and really affecting us this year, because we have vineyards along the whole coast of California, but up in the North Coast, more of the vineyards have ponds that collect rainwater, and we don't have wells, where in, say, Monterey and Santa Barbara, we have wells, but even though the aquifer is going down, we still have water there. But this year we have a lot of ponds that are empty, and therefore these vineyards, that they're not going to make it through the season without any water. They'll make it, but we're going to have to cut back on the crop load, if not cut it completely off, because we don't want to kill the vineyard in 1 year. So that's a big deal right now in say Mendocino and Napa and Sonoma. But the whole concept of managing the water in the vineyard, aside from just saving it and leaving it there, is it helps. We're trying to extend our the quality of life for the wildlife and the animals, and just because water is so cherishable. But it also, you can dial in your plant's needs and direct the plant, kind of going against the mother nature just a little bit, and defining what is the berry size that you're going to have. So many of the vineyards that we have are on mountains and ridges and hillsides and mountains, so that there is no deep water table there for them to dive into at will. So we are actually giving them just what they need, sometimes a hair less, but certainly not wasting anything. And then on your sort of, even though we're a big Chardonnay house, we also make a lot of reds too. And to make a great red, you have to, the smaller that berry, the greater the flavor and the concentration. So you can work that through with your irrigation and crop loads.
I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to come back. We're going to taste, we're going to jump into the Kendall-Jackson Chardonnay, but not right away. I should mention to people listening, if you have the wines, go ahead and start tasting your wine now. I just can't believe how many tastings I've been to where we all taste the wines in the last 3 minutes, which drives me crazy. So get into them. We'll come back and talk about them. Justin, let's talk a little bit about what's happening now at Rodney Strong. You're going to talk a bit about solar energy and what you've been doing there and how that affects your daily life, I guess, as a winemaker.
Absolutely. So thanks for having me again. So at Rodney Strong, we, all the way back in 2003, were actually the first to install, and at the time was the largest solar system in all of Northern California, solar plant that at that point in time really utilized about 30% of our need. We've had it for so long that's actually run its course. And last year, or 2 years ago, we replaced that whole entire solar system with a brand new one and actually expanded it to the point where we have 4,200 solar panels now, which you can see in the slides, covering the majority of our roof space. And that, in conjunction with improving the technology in our winery of where we use the energy, allowed us to really push that supply up to more than 50% of our need. And what that's allowed us to do is just make sure that we are keeping our focus on sustainability and conservation, and allowing us to utilize what Mother Nature provides us much more efficiently. And so what we've done is we paired that solar power to technology within the winery to have more efficient refrigeration, utilizing refrigeration that can be scheduled to turn on and off more precisely. So we're using pretty much the power generated by the sun and not power that is generated by fossil fuels. So we schedule when our, say, refrigeration jackets are turning on and off to make sure that the renewable energy that we're generating is what's really being used versus non-renewables.
And you mentioned a bit, I wonder how you don't waste energy now. You mentioned a bit about the jackets. What are some of the things that happen in the winery that conserve energy, maybe other than just the jacket work? What are some of the things you're doing?
So, a good example of conserving energy, in addition to the jackets, is kind of how we deploy that type of use. And so when you're utilizing energy, especially for chilling, which I talk a lot about because that's by far the largest use of energy in a winery, is the cooling system. It is actually chilling all of the dead space that surrounds all the tanks. So really, for those tanks to cool efficiently, the first thing they're doing is all that energy is actually leaving the tank and cooling the air around it. So what we've done is we've started installing tanks that take up more space. And what I mean by that is they're square in shape versus round in shape. So there's about 30% less dead space in the room, and those tanks are placed closer together. So as that room cools down, we get what's called conductive cooling. And so not only are we using more efficient refrigeration jackets, which I can explain later if you'd like, but we're actually chilling less air, which is by far more efficient, as well as utilizing the tanks to actually cool each other partially. Other things that we've done is we're looking at how we lose energy. So we've installed 6 inches of foam on the tops of all of our roofs below the solar panels, which allows heat not to escape or get into the space. And that's critically important when it comes to how our barrel rooms are maintained. It also helps control humidity, which allows the wine to have less evaporation. So between the proper insulation, which a lot of people talk about all the different R values that are important, the use of better refrigeration technology, as well as motion activated lights and more basic energy conservation tools. So if we're not in a building, we don't have to remember to turn on and off the lights. They automatically go when we're in and out. And more little minor things that all add up to a big savings on the grand scale. And I think at the end of the day, the key to being sustainable, whether it's water use or energy use or how we farm for better quality, is really just becoming more precise about everything we do, looking at it on a granular scale of per vine and per bottle of wine and per tank versus generalized statements that are, thinking about, we use less water, but now we're able to track it back down in some cases to the individual vine. And that allows customers to really get an idea of really that we are sustainable and not just, talking about it. And I think that's why we're starting to gain traction.
People will note, let's try and taste this wine. On the bottom of the front label, Rodney Strong, it says a certified sustainable winery, which we're learning is something that many people are using when they're shopping for wine. So let's talk about the Cabernet Sauvignon, vintage 2018. What can you tell us about how this wine is made and just a little bit share with the people out there that are tasting the wine? By the way, I'm using a bit of tasting science. Over the 20 years of running the National Wine Awards in Canada, we found that tasting Cabernet before Chardonnay was a more effective way for both of those wines to show off. So we're going to try the Cabernet first, then we'll jump back to the Chardonnay. Sonoma County Cabernet 2018.
That is the wine we do best, if you will. It's what pays the bills. And so what our goal with this wine is to really give you and the customer a great look at what Sonoma County can bring to that particular varietal. Mm-hmm. And so the largest component in this wine is from a site called the Cooley Ranch, which is a high elevation vineyard. And we utilize what Mother Nature can bring to us to really push quality. And so we found, especially for red grapes, that elevation can be our best friend. It allows us to get more flavor and more tannin structure. These particular soils up at the Cooley Ranch are also very old. They're 20 million year old greenstone soils, which allow us to farm a lot of these almost dry farming them. Mm-hmm. And that allows that concentration of flavor to come. We also have a lot of fruit from the Alexander Valley. 3 of our other estate sites are Rockaway Brothers and Alexander's Crown Vineyard, which is the vineyard that you see behind me. And then the other big component is Knights Valley. And Knights Valley really brings a lot of blue fruits, red fruits. And when you pair all of these different locations, all within our great home of Sonoma County, you get a wine that is structured, but yet has opulence, great complexity, lots of fruit flavors, but spice and mocha. All this wine is then aged in barrel. And that's important because at the price point, finding wines that's still 100% aged in barrel is quite rare. Mm-hmm. And then, we age that for about 14 months, and then it comes out and makes it your way into your glass.
Very consistent wine. And one of the untold stories, I think, of California varietal wine is the complexity of the blends now that make up these wines. So they're really not single wines of anything, but rather very complex blends of different soil types, different regions, as you explain. And that's what people should be thinking about when they're drinking it. Okay, Phil, sorry to keep you waiting. We're going to jump over to Livermore Valley. We're going to talk a bit about soils and composting, cover crops, and maybe at the end you can touch a bit on dry farming, because if we're out of water, maybe we should be doing that too. So give us an introduction to your long history of growing. And you started out in land management. Did you know something that other people didn't a long time ago?
Well, when you think about sustainability, really, it's a way of life. Family's been farming in the Livermore Valley for 138 years, and practically, if we weren't sustainable, we wouldn't be here now. We wouldn't still be farming the same land. What the wine industry leaders have wisely done is developed a series of definitions and guidelines that allow us to all communicate and practice the same level of that way of life. So we're really proud to basically look at our entire operation through that sustainable lens, but then bringing that down to the vineyard to talk about some of the things that we do in the vineyard. You think about the soil as your bank account. If you don't keep your bank account at least neutral, or gradually continue to invest in it so it grows, you're going to basically lose your ability to both create quality wine and or a harvest at all. So what you're really doing, and I love the fact that I'm here with two companies that have been more than 40 years in the business and are sharing that same experience of, it's a way of life every day. What we really look at is how do we take that drive for creating a quality wine and marry that to our practices in the vineyard that will keep the soil fertile, healthy, and also have an environment that is a polyculture that in fact enhances all of the surroundings rather than detracts from it, but yet still yields that quality that the winemakers want. So one of the marvelous things, and I think Randy touched on it, is the availability of sensors to monitor soil composition, and we all farm different soil types. Climate's a precious, amazing thing that we all have this amazing marine coastal climate, but we're blessed with a series of different soils. And it allows us to vary varieties and clones and spacings, but Also monitoring those different soils and their health and nutrient levels and balance is a key part of what our viticultural team does all the time. So you're looking at the soil health, you're determining what kind of cover crops that you can grow that will enhance the soil health, as well as the vitality of the vineyard and the polyculture that you're supporting around there, and vary that with each soil type throughout the vineyard. And having the opportunity to have farmed the land that we have for as long as we have, we sort of know it like the back of our hand. So we have learned to break out blocks that sort of feature various soil types and how to manage those. One of the things about growing a cover crop is it allows you to be a no-till farming operation, which helps keep carbon sequestered better in the soil than plowing it every year. But we do every 5 to 6 years rotate out to cover crops or rip and level the soil, because part of precision farming, as was mentioned, is also being able to have a vineyard floor that you can mechanize. And that leads me to one other subject that is really close to my daughter Nikki's heart. She's been working with Monarch Tractor Company for quite a while now, and they have developed an autonomous electric tractor that will go up and program itself to go up and down the vineyard rows and do the various farming operations. But it also requires the vineyard operator and manager to have a fairly precision trellis system, vineyard floor and row level, so that the vehicle can learn to manage itself. And so you're bringing all these things together that technology has brought us the availability to enjoy data that we never thought we would have our fingertips on before, and allow us to manage all these kind of micro things. We were laughing earlier when we were getting warmed up. I said, when I started, you took a shovel out and dug a hole and measured soil moisture with your hand, and you looked at how many root fragments were in there and tried to make a judgment of whether or not you were doing a good job or a bad job. But there's still no excuse for eyes on the vineyard, that actually walking up and down the rows and knowing your vines and seeing what's going on and having a feel for the life that's surrounding the vines. There's no replacing that with no amount of sensors and cameras and technology. Your fingertips are about as good a sensor as there is.
Big question, short answer. Sustainability, organics, biodynamics. If you're talking to a young farmer who's getting into the business, what is your advice for them to just get going, and if they're looking at all of these things?
All right, well, I could take a stab at it, and I'd love to hear others, but I have farmed all three over my lifetime and settled on sustainability. I think that each of them have their place, and there's opportunities to, again, enhance what your ultimate goal is, your soil bank, your polyculture, et cetera. But there's also the sort of overall operational balance that we try to bring forth, and we've settled on the fact that we believe sustainability is the best for our operation.
Okay, we're going to jump from a very famous Chardonnay clone over to someone who uses it or knows it very well. Randy, let's talk a bit about the Chardonnay from KJ, and maybe talk about the Wente clone a bit if you could.
Oh, I would. That is great. Because our Chardonnay, all of our Chardonnays are 100% Chardonnay, and all the grapes are coming from various vineyards up and down the cool coast. But they're really interesting, and 95-ish% barrel fermented in real barrels, I might add. But the Wente clone and clone 4 are the driving force, the foundation for our Chardonnay. And then we throw in a few other clones, like what we call the Dijon clones, and then the Rued clones, the Dijon clones give us sort of more of those perfume tones, and the Rued 809 and Z, to be precise, are the ones that are like pure, like a muscat, have that kind of an aroma to them. So you throw all that together and you get a very forward, fruitful Chardonnay, such as Vintners Reserve, because it is grown in a very cool climate. It has a menagerie of these different clones for the aromatics, because really when people go to try a wine, it's got to look good for starters, but it has to smell good too. And if it smells good, and you don't have to have a PhD to figure out what you're smelling with all the great fruit tones, then it's going to taste good. And then you throw in the barrel fermentation part to kind of fill that mid palate out and get a little bit of toasty nuances from the oak. But since it's being fermented in the barrel, then you have the yeast lees down at the bottom of the barrel after the fermentations. You get to stir for this wine once a month, and it goes through that second fermentation for the butter tones. And so this is like a liquid meal, and it just brings on a smile and a nice long finish. It just beckons for another sip and another sip. And
well
we
done.
believe in sustainability all the way.
Yeah, well done. Justin, you touched on a little bit on dry farming. Let's talk a little bit about that. A lot of us look at California and say, well, we know a lot of other places that dry farm. Is that something that could happen in California in time?
I think it depends on the soils that I know it depends on the soils that you're growing in. We've looked across most of our sites, and we've identified the ones that we feel could be dry farmed, and those we're in the process of doing that. There's definitely some soils, especially ones that have tight clay or clay based, that crack a lot and can almost suffocate the roots. My guess is those could not be dry farmed, at least not in a sustainable way where you could farm a viable vineyard for commercial wine production. So I think that people will really look at that on a much greater scale, especially as they go through a round of redevelopment and can pick rootstocks like 420A or 3309 that are very drought tolerant rootstocks that can handle a lot less water usage. Look at the way they're ripping their soil, so they can purposely pick shallow rooting zones, so the once that field capacity is full, there should be enough water with that small vine concept where there's enough for dry farming. But I think it's going to be dependent on level of price point of that bottle, the appetite of lower yields for that winery and winery ownership. That's going to really mean whether you can be fully dry farmed or not.
Phil, I want to talk a bit about the Pinot just before we do. I don't know if you have anything to say about dry farming, but what generally about the future of what's going on in vineyards? Are you feeling positive about the region, like California as a whole, and what's going on in vineyards, and are they on the right track for the next 10 or 15, 20 years?
Wow, that's a big question. So touching on sort of those three things real quick, I'm very positive on vineyards. I think that we're heading towards a little bit better of a supply and demand balance. And I really believe that we are learning in all of the various appellations up and down the coast where we're doing the best job with the proper varieties. So I think there's a really bright future. On dry farming, we dry farmed for almost 70 to 80 years here in the Livermore Valley. And one of the things that I can tell you is that the yields are somewhere between a half a ton and 1.5 tons per acre in our type of climate. So where you're going to get 15 to 20 inches of rainfall a year, you're cutting, in order to get the crop mature, you're going to have to cut back, depending on the soil type, as Justin said. You're going to be adjusting your crop. And so that's all well and good if you can pay, $1,000 an acre for land. Those days are gone. The modern economics and those yields, you got to be getting $500 a bottle for the wine. So there's a disconnect there somewhere. So jumping over to the Pinot Noir, and I think part of my Pinot Noir story real quick is that in the late 50s, it looked as though vineyards in Alameda County and Santa Clara County were going to become extinct. from development and growth of the Bay Area. And my father, Ed Marisu and Otto Meyer of Palmason, decided in the late 50s to go look for a new area that they could pioneer, grow vines in, and decided to start planting vineyards in Monterey County. I think we were the third, Marisu and Palmason first, but we planted our first vineyards there in 1963. And it's a cool region. We're in the Arroyo Seco region, which is adjacent and south of the Santa Lucia Highlands, and a really nice area for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir was one of the first things we planted, and we have some vineyards, Pinot Noir vineyards that we planted in 1963, still going strong. So we've developed a variety of clones over the years, from the old UC Davis releases of Martini and Pomard, 1A, et cetera, to the newer clones, 114, 115, 666, 667, et cetera. And what growing all these various clones does for us is allows us to have a really nice sort of combination of the flavors and textures that each of those will show in their soil type and areas. So at our Reaver Ranch vineyard in the Arroyo Seco area, just west of Greenfield, where we grow this Pinot Noir, we really get some ideal conditions to, I think, produce a beautifully balanced Pinot Noir with a lovely texture. It's 100% Pinot Noir, aged in 50% new French barrels for 16 months and 50% neutral barrels. So I'll quit there.
Showing very well today. I think people who are tasting along with us, they might notice, like I have noticed an incremental jump in quality. I don't think that's any revelation, but it's small but better every year. When you look back over 30 years, when I think about the first California Pinot Noirs I had, I thought that it's never going to happen there. Now I can't believe the quality and of all of these different vines. I think Cabernet we bet on from the beginning, but the rest have really shown well. So I would say congratulations to all of you for what you're doing. I want to come back to sustainability, maybe on a broader issue, company-wise. So at KJ, Randy, I know the young folks are interested in finding solutions today, but what does sustainability mean to, if I walk into KJ tomorrow and I'm hired for a job, do I get some sort of sustainability dressing before I get out there and work?
Well, I don't know about dress code, but you'll certainly get a lecture about what we're doing and what's cooking. I mean, as we discussed, today, on sort of three aspects of sustainability, the power, the land, and water. There's more to it than that, and that's why I think the majority of us are really into sustainability, certified sustainable, versus the other concepts, because it has a broader reach. Sustainability you should be looking at not just right now, but you should be looking and planning for the future. 15, 20, 50, 100 years out, for the next several generations of people and families and the ownership, for sure. That's one part for the future. The other part of why we like sustainability, I believe, as a group, is it's not just the grapes, it's not just the wine in the future. It's the people that work with you and for you. It's the neighbors. It's the animals wandering around and letting them pass through their wildlife corridors instead of maintaining their lives, hopefully not eating all our grapes, but not having a gigantic walled off fence where they have to go around and cross the road and probably get hit by a car. But it's all about that, and then and also giving back to the community. So it's an all-encompassing aspect that sustainability is.
Justin, I know, excuse me, Rodney Strong had a big vision in the beginning, and you guys are fulfilling it. But so how are you connected to the community at Rodney Strong, and how do you, move forward thinking about the way he thought the company might run when he started it, and the way that it's, on its way today under the Klein family?
Well, I mean, I think it's really kind of adding on to what Randy said. But it's the people in the community. And so one of the core things that we feel to keep an active, vibrant community is, taking care of the arts, especially since Rodney Strong was a dancer and was, our success was because of the arts and his previous passion, which was a world famous ballet dancer, led to the founding of the winery. So, we try to support the community by being a big contributor to the Luther Burbank Center for Performing Arts, making sure that all of the children in Sonoma County have access to music and dancing and things that will help their minds thrive. In addition to the STEM type trainings, we provide access to food through food banks, but we also support, and as well as KJ does, I know there's some farm worker support organizations that make sure that all of our people have the tools and access to healthcare and things that they need to be successful in our community, especially due to the cost of living here. And then we just make sure that everybody's paid well above the living wage. So again, the families of our employees can thrive and make the community that much stronger. So we're really active, making sure that we're getting feedback from community leaders and our employees to keep everybody engaged. And what we find is that a little goes a long way. It keeps our people committed and loyal to our brand and our ownership, because they know that we're fighting for them, and then they want to fight back to make the wines that much better.
Beautiful. Phil, it's in some ways, I think it's been a lifelong thing at Wente, because you're in the middle of a community in Livermore. You've been surrounded by people almost from the very beginning, being so close to San Francisco and the Bay, so that you have a strong connection there. I love that you're using these tractors. Does that mean that with nobody driving them, you're going to play more golf, or just kidding? Tell us a little more about how you connect with community at Wente and with the notion of sustainability.
Well, I think that one of the things that we all see is that our business is much more successful if we cooperate and make the community as prosperous and enjoyable. One of the greatest places to live in the world, which defines sort of quality of life, so that your education, your social services, your ability to enjoy recreation and to live a healthy life are critical importance to our employees, to our community, and to us. So the Wente family has a foundation that supports arts education in the Livermore Valley school districts. We support the Wine Growers Foundation here in the Livermore Valley has an annual wine auction that goes to support most of the charities in the valley. So we're very involved in that. We also believe in having a vibrant community, a vibrant town in Livermore, Pleasanton, Dublin, San Ramon, where there's some of the coolest little downtowns where you go and you feel like you're in a snapshot of Americana on a Friday evening, with hundreds of people strolling up and down the streets, enjoying outdoor cafes and great food and wine, and enjoying the life. So all of that is incredibly important to us, and a little bit of golf on the side never hurt anybody.
Yeah. Listen, gentlemen, I'm so excited that you were able to put a little time aside today. It's an important topic, especially for consumers. I know that if we learned anything over the last couple of years with this pandemic, is that we want more information. We want to know where our food comes from. We want to know how the wine is made. And I think that no other industry that I know has been more open than the wine industry to discuss exactly what's going on in their business, which is, what you've done for us today. So I really thank you for that. Maybe I'll leave you with one last quick question. What does sustainability mean to you now after all these years in the wine business? Randy, why don't you go first?
Well, it means be more cognizant of what you're doing, for sure, and paying attention to everything you're doing out there, and not being wasteful, basically. And how are we going to keep this world the way it is? in the future versus just sort of taking everything and discarding what's left over. It's thinking about every action that you're doing for the future.
Thank you, Randy. Justin, final word?
Well, I would just say that, being on a panel with such great other wineries, being around for 100 and long, more than 100 years, and Rodney Strong being around for more than 60, it really puts in perspective the need to do things better so we can be around, in our case, for another 60 or another 120 years. And the key to sustainability, and really the true definition of sustainability, which is why we have settled on this as our practice, is making sure that we're here for the future and for generations to come. And we do that by just being more precise, more methodical, and really thinking about what we're doing before we do it. And we feel that if we can do that and we work collaboratively as a team and as an industry and as a community, then we will be successful in making not just wine in 60 years, but wine that's significantly better and will be even better well received by consumers in 60 years.
Well said. And Phil, last word to you.
I'm excited that the industry's come together and developed a certification process so we can communicate to the consumer these good tasks that we've been doing for a long time. I think the ability to be able to, as you said, let people know what's in the bottle and how much we care about it is really important.
Gentlemen, thank you all for joining me today and spreading the word, particularly across Canada in this case, but many more people will watch this. Thank you also to all of you out there watching, our audience who joined us today. And if you haven't already received the information package, you can visit our website, gismondionwine.com, virtually California, where you can also find our tasting notes, several of the top 10 lists that we've put up on California wines in the last month or so. Talking about different regions, varieties, styles, and California wines. Until the next time, thank you all for joining us. And gentlemen, back to work.
Cheers. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ciao. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers to you all.